Okay, we'll start with the Mangalacharan. Om Ajnana-Timirandasya Jnananjana-Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya-Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yudapadakavalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajadam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paljana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpati Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Pri Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Shiva Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So today we'll continue with the Gita chapter 11 verse 35. Patitataran Prabhu has covered until verse 34. Just for tonight, he told me to take over. So maybe next week he'll continue with the remainder. So today we'll continue with from verse 35 onwards. So in the previous verses, like verse 32, 33, and 34, Lord Krishna had revealed the Vishroba Darshan, and he was also convincing Arjuna, like about how the entire arrangement had already been made, because as we know from chapter 1 itself, Arjuna was the main cause for the distress experienced by Arjuna was that he was viewing everything from the material point of view, and he was also thinking that he was responsible for everything that was going to happen. Like he was thinking that he was going to kill his relatives, and he was afraid of incurring sins. But as a Kshatriya, it was his duty to do so. But still, the main reason for his distress was because of his flawed perspective. He was not viewing it from the right perspective, and things only started to become clear when the Supreme Lord imparted the teachings of the Gita, especially starting from chapter 2, verse 11. So even in these verses, like 11.32 and 33, the Supreme Lord revealed his Vishroba Darshan, and he also mentioned that he is the personification of time, and all the soldiers assembled in the battlefield will be destroyed. And he also went on to say that Arjuna was only an instrument in the fight, because it had already been preordained. The arrangement was already made for by the Supreme Lord to destroy the Adharmic Kaurava forces, and Arjuna was merely being used as an instrument, and the Supreme Lord was also he is also known as Bhaktavatsala. So because he is very loving towards his devotees, and therefore he wanted Arjuna to take credit for the destruction of the evil forces. And the Supreme Lord also wanted to install the Pandavas as the rulers of Hastinapura. So everything was already pre-planned by the Supreme Lord, and he was merely using Arjuna and also the Pandavas as mere instruments. So it was a completely flawed perspective of Arjuna that became the cause for his distress. He was thinking that he was going to kill his relatives and become and he was also thinking that he's going to incur sinful reactions, but the Supreme Lord made it clear that it was all part of the Supreme Lord's arrangement. So Arjuna was only being an instrument in the Supreme Lord's plan to eradicate the adharmic forces. Then in 11.34, the Supreme Lord also instructed Arjuna to simply fight and to vanquish the enemies, because they had already been destroyed by the Supreme Lord, and it was also visible from the uh, universal form, as the descriptions have already been explained in the previous verses. So in today's verses, we'll be seeing how Arjuna was reacting and responding towards what he saw, and also how he was responding to what he heard from the Supreme Lord regarding the mission of the Supreme Lord, and how he specifically chose Arjuna to accomplish the mission. So in today's verse 35, in the previous verses, Arjuna was witnessing uh, the wondrous form of the universal form, and this vision was also visible to other people, not really two. uh, it was more like only Sanjaya was able to witness it, uh, and he was giving the descriptions to Dhritarashtra. So in verse 35, it is back to the point of view of Sanjaya. So Sanjaya is explaining, since he was also able to witness the scene at the battlefield uh, involving the Supreme Lord Krishna and Arjuna. So he was describing what he saw to Dhritarashtra. So in verse 35, Sanjay Uvacha, एतत् श्रुत्वा वचनं केशवस्य कृताञ्जलिर्वेपमाना किरीटी नमस्कृत्वा भूय एवाह कृष्णं सा गतं बीतबीता प्रणम्य. संजय उवाच एतत् श्रुत्वा वचनं केशवस्य कृताञ्जलिर्वेपमाना किरीटी नमस्कृत्वा भूय एवाह कृष्णं सा गतं बीतबीता प्रणम्य. संजय उवाच एतत् श्रुत्वा वचनं केशवस्य कृताञ्जलिर्वेपमाना किरीटी नमस्कृत्वा भूय एवाह कृष्णं सा गदं भीतभीता प्रणम्य. संजय उवाच एतत् श्रुत्वा वचनं केशवस्य कृताञ्जलिर्वेपमाना किरीटी नमस्कृत्वा भूय एवाह कृष्णं सा गदं भीतभीता प्रणम्य. Okay. Can recite.
Can I try, Babu?
Okay, bro.
Sanjay Uvaच एतत् श्रुत्वा वचनं केशवस्य कृताञ्जलिर्वेपमना किरीटी नमस्कृत्वा भूय एव कृष्णं गद्गदं भीत प्रणम्य.
Okay, thank you, bro. Hare Krishna. Next. Mataji. Okay, we'll proceed with the synonyms. Sanjay Uvacha, etat shrutva vachanam kesavasya kritanjalir epamana kiriti namaskritva bhuya evaha krishnam sagat gatam bita pranamya. Sanjay Uvacha, Sanjay said, etat, thus shrutva, hearing, vachanam, the speech, kesavasya, of Krishna, Krita Anjali, with folded hands, epamanaha, trembling, kiriti, Arjuna, namaskritva, offering obeisances, bhuya, again, eva, also, aha, said, Krishnam, unto Krishna, Sagat Gadam, with a faltering voice, Vita Vita, fearful, Pranamya, offering obeisances. Translation: Sanjaya said to the Dhritarashtra, O king, after hearing these words from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the trembling Arjuna offered obeisances with folded hands again and again. He fearfully spoke to Lord Krishna in a faltering voice as follows. Purport: as we have already explained, because of the situation created by the universal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Arjuna became bewildered in wonder. Thus, he began to offer his respectful obeisances to Krishna again and again, and with faltering voice, he began to pray, not as a friend, but as a devotee in wonder. So, we know about the 5 primary rasas. Actually, there are 12 rasas in total. The 5 are primary, and there are also 7 indirect rasas like anger, wonder, chivalry. So Arjuna, who was not only the cousin of Lord Krishna, but he was also the closest friend of Lord Krishna, and that was their relationship until the discourse of the Gita began. But as we know, even from 2.7, chapter 2, verse 7, Arjuna surrendered to the Supreme Lord as a disciple. So in 2.7, Arjuna says, Karpanya dosho padaswava prichami tvam dharma samura cheta yatreyesham nischitam brui tanme shishyati ham shadimam tvam prapannam. Arjuna says, I surrender to you as a disciple. I'm confused about my duty. So I'm surrendering to you as a disciple and as a soul surrendered to you. So you please tell me what is best for me. So in chapter 1, it was a complete monologue of Arjuna. He was expressing his distress about what he was witnessing, and he refused to fight. So the Supreme Lord only began to speak in chapter 2. And even in chapter 2, verse number 2, the Supreme Lord did not start to impart the knowledge of the Gita straight away. At first, in chapter 2, verse number 2, he was only like admonishing Arjuna for his impure behavior of wanting to abandon his duty. So the actual discourse only started after Arjuna surrendered as a disciple to the Supreme Lord in verse number 7 of the second chapter. Then the actual teachings were being imparted by the Supreme Lord only from verse number 11 in chapter 2. Then also in the third verse of chapter 4, actually in the first 2 verses, the Supreme Lord made it, he explained to Arjuna about why he wanted to impart the knowledge of the Gita again, though it was actually spoken many million years before to Vivaswan. And that was in the first verse. Then in the second verse, the Supreme Lord explained that though the knowledge was being imparted through the disciplic succession, but the chain was broken in due course of time. And therefore, the Supreme Lord wanted to re-establish he wanted to re-establish the chain of disciplic succession by imparting the knowledge to someone who was qualified like Arjuna. And the Supreme Lord also made it very clear. He specifically mentioned in the third verse of chapter 4, Bhakto Sime Saka Cheti. The Supreme Lord mentioned that Arjuna was not only his friend but also his dearmost devotee, and therefore Arjuna was qualified to receive the transcendental teachings of the Gita. So um, until chapter 11, until Arjuna actually witnessed the universal form, he was um, he was interacting with the Supreme Lord just like a friend. But after witnessing the universal form, he was a devotee who was struck with wonder. So there's actually a change in the rasa. So the five primary rasas, Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. So those are the five primary rasas, and the seven secondary rasas. Wonder comes under the seven secondary rasas. So there is a change in the rasa experienced by Arjuna from being a friend. Uh, he was actually he was always interacting with the Supreme Lord Krishna as a friend. But after witnessing the universal form, he um, he was experiencing the rasa of wonder as a devotee, and therefore he started to offer obeisances with folded hands again and again. And also there was also the change in the way he spoke, because we also know that in almost all the chapters, Arjuna was he kept on questioning the Supreme Lord uh, repeatedly. He did not actually he did not ask the same questions again and again, but he was asking questions on various um subject matters. So it was the Gita also was not a mere monologue of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord also was merciful enough to ensure that his devotee understood what was being spoken, and he was also willing to explain uh, the knowledge of the Gita to Arjuna as he desired. So from that stage, like interacting with a friend, the change of rasa became like the rasa of wonder. And as a devotee, he started to offer obeisances, and also the way he spoke changed in a faltering voice. Text 36, Arjuna Vacha, Stani Rishikesha Tava Prakritya Jagat Praharsyati Anurajyate cha Raksham Sibitani Jisho Dravanti Sarve Namasyanti cha Siddha Sangha. Arjuna said, O master of the senses, the world becomes joyful upon hearing your name, and thus everyone becomes attached to you. Although the perfected beings offer you their respectful homage, the demons are afraid and they flee here and there. All this is rightly done. So, out of five, uh, the five primary rasas, Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya, those are uh, the direct relationships between the devotees and the Supreme Lord. But regarding uh, the other rasas, there are also rasas which are experienced by the demons, like, for example, Kansa and Ravana. They were also uh, always uh, meditating upon the Supreme Lord, like since they were fearing their impending death. So uh, even unknowingly, they also were meditating upon the Supreme Lord, though it was uh, in the wrong rasa. Still, uh, even between the demons and the Supreme Lord, there was this um, exchange. Uh, the devotees, including the demigods, they revere the Supreme Lord, but it is the exact opposite in the case of the demons. So, whenever the Supreme Lord descends to re-establish Dharma, as he himself says in Gita 4.8, Dharma Samstapanataya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. So the demons will always become afraid about their impending death and destruction. Purport. Arjuna, after hearing from Krishna about the outcome of the battle of Kurukshetra, became enlightened, and as a great devotee and friend of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he said that everything done by Krishna is quite fit. Arjuna confirmed that Krishna is the maintainer and the object of worship for the devotees and the destroyer of the undesirables. So this is what the Supreme Lord also says in Gita 4.8. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha duskridam dharma samtapanataya sambhavami yuge yuge. The Supreme Lord descends to the material world to protect the pious devotees and to annihilate the demons and also to re-establish the principles of dharma. His actions are equally good for all. Arjuna understood herein that when the battle of Kurukshetra was being concluded, in outer space there were present many demigods, siddhas, and the intelligentsia of the higher planets, and they were observing the fight because Krishna was present there. When Arjuna saw the universal form of the Lord, the demigods took pleasure in it, but others, who were demons and atheists, could not stand it when the Lord was praised. Out of their natural fear of the devastating form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they fled. Krishna's treatment of the devotees and the atheists is praised by Arjuna. In all cases, a devotee glorifies the Lord because he knows that whatever he does is good for all. So, as the Supreme Lord has also mentioned in chapter 9, regarding especially in 9.31, Shivram Bhavati Dharmatma Shashwat Shantim Nigachati Kaunteya Pradijani Name Bhakta Pranashati. So whatever the Supreme Lord does is always for the benefit of the devotees, and apart from the self-proclaimed intellectuals who often come up with their own to-do list for the Supreme Lord, they say that if God exists, he should do this, he should do that. Apart from them, sometimes even the devotees, even they themselves might have some doubts about why they are facing some setbacks or why bad things happening to them, despite them being devotees. So even such things might trouble the minds of certain devotees, but with proper knowledge from the authentic sources, we can easily clear all our doubts, because even from Srimad Bhagavatam, we know very well that none of the exalted devotees of the Supreme Lord had a very, it was not like, this was actually in terms of their material life. They never had everything going for them in the easiest way possible. There are many examples of such exalted devotees who always had to suffer a lot, but they their bhakti was always undeviated. For example, Prahlad Maharaj, and also in the case of the Pandavas, they had to undergo so many sufferings, but they were always undeviated from their path of bhakti towards the Supreme Lord. So true devotees who have been completely cleansed and purified of all the material desires, only they will be able to understand the design of the Supreme Lord. Only when the devotees are completely purified, only then they can understand that whatever the Supreme Lord does is ultimately for the benefit of the devotees, because the Supreme Lord also mentions in Gita 5.29, Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhurdam Sarvabhutanam Nyatma Mam Shanti Mrichati. So for devotees who are completely cleansed of all their material contamination, and once they are able to understand that everything that the Supreme Lord does is ultimately for their benefit, since he is the supreme well-wisher of all living entities, then uh, devotees will be able to attain peace. So that's what the Supreme Lord himself says in 5.29. In 5.29, he makes it very clear when he says that he is the supreme well-wisher of all the living entities. So um, in 5.29, he says that, and also in 9.31, he um, again he gives the assurance that my devotee never perishes. Though there may be uh, temporary hardships, ultimately the Supreme Lord uh, always saves the devotee from the greatest danger. Even in the case of Prahlad Maharaj, he was facing life-threatening situations in uh, many ways, but he was saved by the Supreme Lord when every attempt was made to kill him. Prahlad Maharaj was saved by the Supreme Lord himself because of his undeviated bhakti. And it was the same in the case of the Pandavas, though they had to face so many hardships. Uh, Still, ultimately, they were saved by the Supreme Lord, especially when the battle of Kurukshetra happened. Uh, Even after the battle, the Supreme Lord saved the sole surviving offspring of the Pandavas, Maharaj Parikshit. So, uh, apart from the ignorant uh, bunch of self-proclaimed intellectuals who think that God should always do everything according to their desires, even sometimes devotees who are facing hardships in life, they themselves also might have some doubts about why bad things are happening to them. But we can only understand the arrangements of the Supreme Lord if we are fully cleansed of all sorts of material contamination. And that's why in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it has been mentioned that topmost devotional service should be cleansed of all sorts of fruitive activity and material desires. Anyabilash sunyam jnana karmati anavritam anukulyena krishnanu shelanam bhakti uttamaha. Uh, the Supreme Lord also says in Gita 7.16 about the four types of people who surrender to him compared to the four types of people who never surrender to him. As specified in Gita 7.15, there are four types of people who surrender to him. Chaturvida bhajante mam, jana sukirtuna arjuna, atma jignasu ratati, jnani cha bharatarshava. So, these four types of people, those who are seeking material wealth, those who are in distress, those who are inquisitive, and also the jnanis, they all surrender to the Supreme Lord. However, the Supreme Lord also explains that uh, he regards all four types of people as Mahatmas. Still, he specifically prefers the Jnani who knows about uh, pure devotional service, because even for the inquisitive person wants to gain knowledge, but the Jnani is actually already established in complete knowledge about the self. And when we say knowledge about the self, it is not merely restricted to understanding uh, the self as a spirit soul, but uh, it should also culminate in understanding the true position, the true constitutional position of the self as the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. So the Jnani who is uh, truly uh, realized in the knowledge of self-realization, he would be able to understand his true constitutional position, and he will be engaged in devotional service. So out of the four types of people who surrender to Supreme Lord, only the Jnani is able to engage in pure devotional service with the right knowledge. So all these important knowledge are already present there in the authentic scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Simply, if we study the Srimad Bhagavatam, though it is often referred to as Krishna Katha, the Supreme Lord Krishna is never viewed as separate from his devotees. The beauty of Bhagavatam is that it not only talks about the Supreme Lord alone, but it also talks about the many other exalted devotees like Brahma, Narada Muni, Prahlad Maharaj, and also the Pandavas. So, from the Bhagavatam, we can clearly see that though all these devotees, they all had to undergo so many material miseries, but due to their undeviated devotion and selfless service to the Supreme Lord, they were always saved by the Supreme Lord. So, only by understanding these important knowledge from the authentic scriptures, we will be able to understand that everything that the Supreme Lord does is ultimately for the benefit of the devotees. Text 37. Asmat Chatena Nameran Mahatman Gariyase Brahmano Api Adikrasti Ananta Devesha Jagannivasa Tvam Aksharam Sat Asat Tat Param Yat. Translation. O great one, greater even than Brahma, you are the original creator. Why then should they not offer their respectful obeisances unto you? O limitless one, God of gods, refuge of the universe. You are the invincible source, the cause of all causes, fundamental to these material manifestations.
You are unmuted. Mute my microphone. Button.
Okay. There are several important keywords from this verse, like Ananta Devesha Jagannivasa. Okay, here Ananta, though it looks similar to Ananda, Ananta actually means unlimited, and Ananda refers to bliss. Jagannivasa, refuge of the universe. So these are the verses spoken by Arjuna, quite similar to what he spoke in chapter 10 also, as we know from chapter 10, verses 8 to 11 are the Chatusloki verses. Then from verse 12 to 14, Arjuna uh, also describes the attributes of the Supreme Lord. Again, in this verse also, he's describing many attributes of the Supreme Lord as he is the source of everything, even the source of Brahma himself, as the primary creator. And this was also mentioned by Lord Brahma himself in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2. In Canto 2 of Bhagavatam, there is the conversation between Narada Muni and Lord Brahma. Narada Muni actually, he was intrigued to know about the kind of austerities that were performed by Lord Brahma. So he was thinking that since Lord Brahma himself is always involved in so many austerities, so there must be a, a, a greater uh, a greater force that is guiding him in the uh, in the business of creation. So in those chapters, especially in chapters 5 and 6 of the second canto of Bhagavatam, Lord Brahma himself explains to Narada Muni that he is only the secondary creator, and he, with humility, he explains that he only creates what had already been discovered uh, by the Supreme Lord himself. So that is also like related to the Purusha Avatar the Purushavatara concepts. Purport. By this offering of obeisances, Arjuna indicates that Krishna is worshipable by everyone. He is all-pervading and he is the soul of every soul. Arjuna is addressing Krishna as Mahatma, which means that he is most magnanimous and unlimited. Ananta indicates that there is nothing which is not covered by the influence and energy of the Supreme Lord. And Devesha means that he is the controller of all demigods and is above them all. So as we can see from these keywords, in the verse, in the sloka here, the word is Devesha, Jagan Nivasa, but they are actually composed of these individual words. Devesha is actually Deva Isha, the supreme controller of all the demigods, and Jagan Nivasa comes from Jagat Nivasa, refuge of the universe. Devesha means that he is the controller of all demigods and is above them all. He is the shelter of the whole universe. Arjuna also thought that it was fitting that all the perfect living entities and powerful demigods offer their respectful obeisances unto him, because no one is greater than him. Arjuna especially mentions that Krishna is greater than Brahma, because Brahma is created by him. Brahma is born out of the lotus stem grown from the navel abdomen of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who is Krishna's plenary expansion. Therefore, Brahma and Lord Shiva, who is born of Brahma, and all other demigods must offer their respectful obeisances. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam that the Lord is respected by Lord Shiva and Brahma and similar other demigods. So, as mentioned earlier, Lord Brahma himself, he glorifies the Supreme Lord Krishna in the second canto and also in the fourth canto, especially in chapter 24. It is about the song by Lord Shiva praising the glories of the Supreme Lord. So in that whole chapter, chapter 24 of the fourth canto, Lord Shiva describes the glories of the Supreme Lord Krishna, and he himself also, as the topmost Vaishnava, he is expressing his devotion towards the Supreme Lord Krishna in that chapter, chapter 24 of the fourth canto. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that the Lord is respected by Lord Shiva and Brahma and similar other demigods. The word Aksharam is very significant because this material creation is subject to destruction, but the Lord is above this material creation. There's also this verse from chapter 15 of the Gita, from verses 16 to 18. The Supreme Lord talks about the two types of living beings, Sharas, Akshara. So the Sharas are the fallible beings. So everything that is present in this material world is fallible and it is vulnerable. It is subject to destruction, not just destruction, not just one. It is not just one-time destruction. It keeps repeating. The cycle of creation and destruction keeps repeating again and again. So this has also been explained in chapter 8 of the Gita, from verses 15 onwards. So that is the position of all the fallible living beings in this material world. But in the spiritual world, everything is infallible. So that is Aksharam. But in verses 17 and 18 of the 15th chapter of Gita, the Supreme Lord explains that he is actually transcendental. He is beyond both the fallible and infallible. So he's even, it is not like the infallible beings, the liberated souls attain a similar position to the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world. Still, even in the spiritual world, the infallible living beings, the liberated souls, they are still subservient to the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental towards everything that is fallible and infallible. So that is why the Supreme Lord is celebrated as Purushottama. This has been described by the Supreme Lord in chapter 15 of the Gita, titled Purushottama Yoga. So the word Aksharam also signifies that the Lord is above not just the material creation, but he is above everything. Because whether it is the material creation or the spiritual creation, the total creation, everything that exists emanates from his energy. And him being the source of the energy, so he is above everything else. He is transcendental, and therefore he is known as Purushottama. He is the cause of all causes, and being so, he is superior to all the conditioned souls within this material nature, as well as the material cosmic manifestation itself. He is therefore the all great supreme. Text 38. Tvam adideva purusha purana tvam asya vishvasya param nidanam ittasi vedyam cha param cha dama tvaya tatam vishvam ananta rupa. You are the original personality of Godhead, the oldest, the ultimate sanctuary of this manifested cosmic world. You are the knower of everything, and you are all that is knowable. You are the supreme refuge above the material modes. O limitless form, this whole cosmic manifestation is pervaded by you. Purport: everything is resting on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he is the ultimate rest. Nidanam means that everything, even the Brahman effulgence, rests on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He is the knower of everything that is happening in this world. And if knowledge has any end, he is the end of all knowledge. Therefore, he is the known and the knowable. He is the object of knowledge because he is all pervading. Because he is the cause in the spiritual world, he is transcendental. He is also the chief personality in the transcendental world. So Arjuna is describing that he is the oldest. We can also find this from the Brahma Samhita. Govindam Adi Purusham, the original personality of Godhead, the oldest, the ultimate sanctuary of this manifested cosmic world. So he is the ultimate rest, as described using this word Nidanam. This word also appears in chapter 9 of the Gita, in chapter 9, verse 18. In that verse, the Supreme Lord says, Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi Nidanam Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi Nidanam Suril Prabha Pralayasthanam Nidanam Bijamaviyam. So the word Nidanam also appears in verse 18 of chapter 9. So he is the ultimate rest because in the Purusha avatars, as we know, there are three levels, the three Purusha avatars. It begins from Mahavishnu, from his breathing. So when he exhales in the Karana ocean, the water bubbles which emanate from the pores of his body, they form the material universes. Every bubble is one material universe. So in each of those bubbles, the secondary planetary expansion of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu becomes the chief in that material universe, and Lord Brahma takes birth in every material universe. Then further in that material universe, the Shirodakashaya Vishnu expansion also takes place. So this happens for a specific period of time, and then when Mahavishnu inhales, then everything rests inside his body. So after the process of destruction of all these material universes, still all the living entities are absorbed into the body of Mahavishnu, and that is how he becomes the ultimate rest, Nidanam. So still, but Mahavishnu himself, this is only like limited to the material context, because Mahavishnu is the planetary expansion who is specifically meant for administering the material world, and therefore this is in the case of the administering the material world. But whether it is in the spiritual world or for the entire creation, everything happens through the planetary expansions of the Supreme Lord Krishna, and therefore he is the ultimate rest for everything. If Mahavishnu is regarded as the rest or Nidanam for the material creation, but Mahavishnu himself is the planetary expansion of the Supreme Lord Krishna, and therefore the Supreme Lord is actually the Nidanam of all other Nidanams, and that's how he is established as Purushottama, the source of everything, the cause of all causes. So he is also the source of the Brahman effulgence, the Brahmajyoti effulgence. He is the knower of everything that is happening in this world. Also, there's another verse from chapter 7, 7.26. Vedam samatitani bhavishyani cha bhutani mantu vedana kachana. Vedam samatitani vatmani cha charjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mantu vedana kachana. He knows everything that happened in the past, present, and future. And regarding knowledge itself, of course, in chapter 13, the Supreme Lord also gives a very elaborate description about what is to be regarded as knowledge. So even if we consider all those separate aspects of knowledge as described by the Supreme Lord, in chapter 15 also it has been concluded that he is the knower of everything, and he is also the object of all knowledge. So this is what he says in 15.15. Sarvasya cham priti sannivista matta smriti jnana hapovanam cha vedaisya sarve amem vedya vedanta krit veda videva chaham. Vedaisya sarve amem vedya vedanta krit veda videva chaham. He is the source of all the Vedas, and by all the Vedas only he is to be known. So he is the object of all knowledge. So in that verse, Veda, it actually refers to knowledge. So Veda is not actually restricted to spiritual knowledge, but because prior to the introduction of this so-called modern education system in the ancient Gurukulas, the Vedic system it covered all the different subject matters. There were material branches of subject matters, and but still they all culminated in spiritual knowledge. There was also enough emphasis was given for spiritual knowledge also, and that's why the Brahmanas were always regarded as the topmost varna, because the role of a Brahmana was to impart knowledge about Brahman, Brahma Jana iti Brahmana. So it is important to understand that knowledge about Brahman, the spiritual knowledge, because only that knowledge can cure our material disease. He is the object of knowledge because he is all-pervading, because he is the cause in the spiritual world. He is transcendental. He is also the chief personality in the transcendental world. So these aspects of the Supreme Lord being the transcendental person who is even above the spiritual world, because the spiritual world itself emanates from the spiritual world is more like a byproduct of his superior spiritual energy, and therefore he himself is the source of the spiritual world, and therefore he is established as Purushottama, the topmost transcendental personality. Text 39. Vayuryamognirvaruna shashanka prajapati svam prapitamascha namo namaste stu sahasrakritva punascha bhuyopi namo namaste. You are air, and you are the supreme controller. You are fire, you are water, and you are the moon. You are Brahma, the first living creature, and you are the great grandfather. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you 1,000 times, and again and yet again. The Lord is addressed here as air because the air is the most important representation of all the demigods, being all pervasive. Arjuna also addresses Krishna as the great grandfather because he is the father of Brahma, the first living creature in the universe. So, this apart from the descriptions in uh, there are also further descriptions in the third canto also about the process of creation, the creations by Brahma. But even prior to that, in the second canto, Lord Brahma himself reveals about how he himself was born uh, out of Vishnu, and how he was in search of knowledge, and how he got inspired uh, to uh, to be engaged in the business of creation. So, since Brahma is the first living entity, the topmost Jiva Tattva, and he himself comes from the Supreme Lord, and therefore the Supreme Lord Krishna is addressed as the great grandfather. Text 40. Nama Purastat Ata Prastataste Namostu Te Sarvata Eva Sarva Ananta Viryamita Vikramastvam Sarvam Samapnosi Tatosi Sarva. Obeisances to you from the front, from behind, and from all sides. O unbounded power, you are the master of limitless might. You are all pervading, and thus you are everything. Purport: out of loving ecstasy for Krishna, his friend, Arjuna is offering his respects from all sides. He is accepting that he is the master of all potencies and all prowess, and far superior to all the great warriors assembled on the battlefield. It is said in the Vishnu Purana 1969, Yoyam Tavagato Deva Samipam Devata Gana Satvam Eva Jagat Shrashta Yata Sarvagato Bhavan. Whoever comes before you, even if he be a demigod, is created by you, O Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, since Lord Brahma himself was created by the Supreme Lord, all the demigods who are also like subservient to Lord Brahma, since Lord Brahma himself is the topmost Jiva Tattva in the material universe. So even the demigods who occupy the lower planets below Satyaloka, um, so even they themselves are subservient to Lord Brahma, and therefore even the demigods are subservient to the Supreme Lord. And since Arjuna was witnessing the universal form, the unlimited universal form, so he was offering obeisances from all sides. So this was the extent of wonder that Arjuna was experiencing, and he was uh, describing the uh, glorious aspects of the Supreme Lord that he was witnessing. And though the Supreme Lord uh, he always resides in his transcendental abode in Goloka Vrindavana, still he is also present in everything. He is described as all pervasive because through the Shirodakasai Vishnu, the third Purusha Avatara, he pervades the entire material universe. He accompanies all the jivas, all the individual spirit souls, and also he enters into every atom in the material universe, and that's how the entire material universe becomes animate, because without the presence of the super soul and the individual spirit souls, there's nothing else left in the material world except dead matter, the 24 Mahatattva elements. So the Supreme Lord, though he is eternally present in his transcendental abode, but through his various planetary expansions, he also administers the affairs of the material universe. So such is the glorious position, and such is the prowess of the Supreme Lord. That's why it is extremely foolish to think that the jivas, the helpless uh, individual spirit souls, are can, can never be equal to the Supreme Lord, even after liberation. Mm, so also after being wonderstruck, Arjuna also continues to express his we can also see based on what he speaks in these verses about the change of the rasa. As mentioned earlier, he was always interacting with the Supreme Lord Krishna as a friend, but we can also see the change of the rasa from the Sakya rasa to the devotee in wonder. Saketi matva prasavam yat uktam he Krishna he Yadava he Saketi ajanata mahimanam tavedam maya pramadat pranayena vapi yachavahasartam asatkritosi viharasayashana bhojaneshu ekota vapi achyuta tat samaksham tat shamaye tvam aham aprameyam. Translation: Thinking of you as my friend, I have rashly addressed you, O Krishna, O Yadava, O my friend, not knowing your glories. Please forgive whatever I may have done in madness or in love. I have dishonored you many times, jesting as we relaxed, lay on the same bed, or sat or ate together, sometimes alone and sometimes in front of many friends. O infallible one, please excuse me for all those offenses. So this is also this is how Arjuna experienced the change of rasa from being a close friend. So he was always thinking of the Supreme Lord as his close friend, and he was, of course, these were very natural interactions. Uh, but after seeing the universal form and seeing the true self of the Supreme Lord as revealed by himself, so Arjuna started to apologize for all those offenses that he might have he had committed earlier. So again, this shows the change of the rasa experienced by Arjuna from Sakyaras to uh, the devotee, the wonderstruck devotee. Uh, so as long as Arjuna was seeing the Supreme Lord without actually knowing that he was the Supreme Lord, uh, he was treating the exchanges were very natural, but uh, after seeing the universal form, he was completely in a wonderstruck state, and therefore he's asking for forgiveness from the Supreme Lord. Although Krishna is manifested before Arjuna in his universal form, Arjuna remembers his friendly relationship with Krishna and is therefore asking pardon and requesting Krishna to excuse him for the many informal gestures which arise out of friendship. He is admitting that formerly he did not know that Krishna could assume such a universal form, although Krishna explained it as his intimate friend. Arjuna did not know how many times he may have dishonored Krishna by addressing him, O my friend, O Krishna, O Yadava, etc., without acknowledging his opulence. But Krishna is so kind and merciful that in spite of such opulence, he played with Arjuna as a friend. Such is the transcendental loving reciprocation between the devotee and the Lord. The relationship between the living entity and Krishna is fixed eternally. It cannot be forgotten, as we can see from the behavior of Arjuna. Although Arjuna has seen the opulence in the universal form, he cannot forget his friendly relationship with Krishna. So this was the experience of Arjuna after seeing the universal form, and we know that even this universal form was merely a spark of the total energy of the Supreme Lord. So a devotee would be able to understand the exalted position of the Supreme Lord, and he will be he would be willing to surrender to the Supreme Lord as Arjuna did. and the Supreme Lord also reciprocates to this loving devotion by devotees, because even before the war itself, the Supreme Lord, uh, the master of the universe, he agreed to be the charioteer. He offered himself to be the chariot driver of Arjuna. Thus, this had been explained as how the Supreme Lord exhibited his opulence of renunciation. Out of all the six opulences, namely wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge, and renunciation, the Supreme Lord has all these six opulences as Bhagavan, as described by Parashara Muni. He has all the six opulences uh, in abundance, uh, compared to uh, the mere mortals of the material world. Uh, People may not even have one or two opulences, and that too will be in a very limited quantity. But the Supreme Lord has all the six opulences, and the most important one is actually the opulence of renunciation, because uh, even though he has all the five opulences, he is always willing to renounce it for the sake of his devotees as Bhakta Vatsala. And this is the beauty of this, the loving exchanges between the Supreme Lord and the devotees. So this loving relationship is eternal, and it is just due to our current condition of being conditioned souls. We have forgotten this eternal relationship. Through the practice of Krishna consciousness, we can revive this forgotten relationship and regain the association of the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world. That's all for today. Next week, most probably, Patita Taran Prabhu will continue with text 43. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Mm, yep. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.